Today's daf we're going to be learning is daf kufyud. It's a pretty long daf, so we'll see how quickly we get through it. Reminding everyone to sign up for the siyum. And today's daf is sponsored by Michael Radwin in honor of Ariella Radwin's 45th birthday. Your dedication to Torah learning is the inspiration for me to begin studying daf Yomi. Mazel tov. Music to my ears. Okay, quick. From last week, I noticed this right after I finished the Shiur, which is, we talked about the half trees. So if you look in Rashi says right there, it's usually the obvious place to look if you're struggling with something. I should have looked during class. But anyway, it says that, what does it mean to own a half tree? It means that someone else is a half owner. That was right. Someone else owns it together with, father owned it with someone else in a partnership. That's how we always get to the Chatzi Eved, Chatzi Ben Cholin. How could you ever be half of anything? It should have been obvious to me. But anyway, it evaded me at that point, but shutafut, it jointly owned it. So that means basically she owns half a tree because someone else owns the other half. Okay, getting now to today's case. Okay, we have a study guide. I'm going to share screen. So if you're watching, great. If not, you can open it on your own. Recommended. Okay. We're now going to continue in the Machlokot, Admon, and Chachamim, and then we're going to get to the end of the Masechet, which is totally different, which all has to do with, about living in Israel. Plus other issues that could come up between spouses about wanting to live in different places. A very interesting way to end the Masechet. One pulls out, you owe me money, and the other says, well, after that, you sold me a field. Okay, so now let's explain the case. Yomi pulls out, okay, I gave examples in the chart. Yomi pulls out a shtar and says to Ruth, you owe me money. Ruth says, but what are you talking about, Yomi? You sold me a field after the loan. What does this matter? Well, Admon Omer, Yacholu Sheyomar, what happened when Naomi sold the field to Ruth? Ruth gave her a big sum of money. Now, if Ruth owed Naomi money, Naomi comes forward and says, Ruth, you owe me all this money from a loan from way back. And Ruth says, well, in the meantime, you sold me a field. And if really you would sold, I owed you money, and Ruth is claiming that the document of the IOU is a forgery. She says, if really I owed you money, you wouldn't have sold me your field. You would have taken the money for the loan. So basically, according to Admon, Ruth can claim that it's a forged document. Chachamim said the opposite. Yomi was super smart that Ruth owed her all this money. And Yomi sold her a field. What was the point of selling her the field? Because Yomi knew that if Ruth ended up having a field, then she'd be able to collect the loan. If Ruth has cash right now on hand, and for whatever reason doesn't want to give it back to Yomi for the loan, she might just spend it on, dresses and clothes and whatever else, and she'll lose the money, and then Yomi will have no way to get the money back from Ruth. So Yomi says, this is a better way to do it. I'll sell her my land, and then I'll have something to collect back. As soon as I sell her the land, I'll take the land, right, on account of my loan, whether it's immediately or later or whatever it is. So basically, Chachamim say there's a good reason why Naomi would have sold the land to Ruth, even though Ruth owed her money. So now the Gemara says, "My Tamid Rabbanit, Shapir Kamar Admon." They're much more convinced by Admon's approach, and they say, "We don't understand the rabbi's approach. Admon's right. It doesn't really make any sense that Naomi would do that. She would just take the money back on account of her loan." So the Gemara then limits the machloket and says the following: if they give the money first, usually if it's a place where this is what they do, I'm selling you property, first you give me the money, then we write the deed. If first Naomi got the money, and only after that did they write the shtar, so Naomi should take the money as if she's going to sell Ruth the field. And then before they write the shtar, she's going to say, oh, but by the way, you owe me all this money, and I'm taking it back. And then really, if she didn't do that, and she anyway wrote the shtar, Ruth can claim the first document must be forged because there's no way you would have done that and taken this money for a sale when you could have just taken it for the loan. Even Chachamim will agree. But if they live in a place where first they write the contract, and then they give money, then Admon says, if really the rabbis are right, that Naomi just wanted you to have land so that she wanted Ruth to have land so that she could collect the loan from Ruth, then Admon Savar, If she wanted to do it for that reason, just so that they could so the root could have property, she should, and really she wasn't selling it to her for a legitimate, it wasn't like a real sale. It was a sale so that Yomi could get the land back. She should have, now we've seen this many times, and we just saw this yesterday. She should have written or, told a bunch of people and gone to them and said, listen, I just want you all to know that I'm not really selling her this land. I'm just selling her this land so that I can demand it back. So she doesn't have problems down the road. So she should have done a moda'ah. The fact that she didn't do a moda'ah shows that she obviously wasn't trying the mashkana. Okay, because again, first they wrote the shtar and then they gave the money. So if she wanted to basically turn the whole thing into replacement of her loan, she should have written a moda'ah. For Rabbanan Savri, just like we saw yesterday. No, the reason she didn't do a moda'ah is because where it gets around. Everybody has a friend and they'll tell their friend and they'll tell their friend, and basically we'll get back to Ruth and she'll never go through with the sale, right? She'll never give the money because remember, they wrote the shtar and they haven't given the money. So if Nomi writes a moda'ah, it'll get back to Ruth and she'll never pay the money. And that's really all that Nomi wants. So basically in that case is a machloket, Admon and the rabbis about whether she's supposed to write a moda'ah, or the rabbis who think, no, she can't write a moda'ah. So if she didn't write a moda'ah, that doesn't prove anything, and she could still claim, I did it only so I'd have land to collect. That was case one. Case two, new Mishna. Okay, we're now in the last machloket of Admon and the rabbis. Shnayim shotziu shtarchov ze al ze. Okay, Nomi, Ruth takes out a shtar that Nomi owes her money, and Nomi takes out a shtar saying, Ruth, you owe me money. In other words, each took out a shtar saying, you took out a loan from me, and you took out a loan from me. Now, it's a little bit strange to do this kind of thing, because why would, if I loaned you money, and then later I want money, I need money, I go back to you and I say, give me my money back. Why would I say, can you loan me some money also? Doesn't make any sense. Obviously, there are two different dates here. There's the earlier one and the later one. So first one loan money to the other, and then the other loan money back to the first one. Makes no sense, really. So Admon Omer, the one who comes second and says, you owe me money, okay, so when first Ruth pulls out a shtar saying, Nomi, you owe me money. And then Nomi says, what are you talking about? You owe me money. So, sorry, it should be the reverse. Nomi pulls out the first shtar, okay? Nomi has the earlier date. Nomi says, you owe me money from January. And then Ruth says, we took out a loan in June, and you owe me money. So Ruth can claim, only you owe me money. I certainly don't owe you money, because she could say, if I really owed you, then why did I borrow money from you? In other words, if I really owed you money, how could it be that you borrowed money from me? And therefore, there's no way, and since I have a document that says you borrowed money from me, there's no way that I borrowed money from you. No way, no how. You wouldn't have taken out a loan if I owed you money. You would have just collected your money back. Each one is valid. Okay, basically against Admon, just like the previous Mishnah. You can't claim the first one was a forgery. Each one can collect. We don't yet understand exactly Chachamim's opinion. We're going to have to get there. But before we get there, we're going to bring a machloket between Rav Sheshet and Rav Nachman. Okay, so we started with machloket Tanaim between Admon and Chachamim, and now we're going to machloket between Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshet. So in this case, sorry, I'm trying to get the page properly. Okay. Which is exactly our case. Two people pull out that you owe me money, right? You owe me money? No, you owe me money. Rav Nachman Amar Zegove v'Zegove, which matches exactly the rabbi's opinion. They each collect. Rav Sheshet Amal Hafuche mitar talamali. Ela zeh me b'shalom v'zeh me b'shalom. It's like switching donkey packs. You have a nice JanSport bag. I have a nice JanSport bag. Why don't we just swap, right? What would be the point of me giving you mine and you giving me yours? So here, there's no point for Ruth to pay back Yomi and Yomi to pay back Ruth. Each one should just keep their own land. Okay, nobody needs to pay anybody back because it's basically, right? The assumption here is that we're talking about loans for the same amount of money, because if each owes the other money, right? Why should you collect and then why should I collect? We'll just leave everything where it is, and it's a zero-sum game. So now we're going to get off a little bit on this machloket. And in what case are they really arguing Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshet? And then we're going to ask later, How does Rav Sheshet fit in with the Mishnah? Because the Mishnah said in the exact language of Rav Nachman, zegove, v'zegove. And Rav Sheshet says, no, they each don't collect. It's each one just stays with what they have. So how does that work with the Mishnah is going to be the second part. So the first part is going to be, what's the case of the machloket? What kind of land are we discussing? In which case don't they disagree? In which case do they all agree? And we're going to have two different explanations of the Mishnah. So first the Gemara says, first explanation, well, this everyone agrees with, no matter what. Okay, everyone agrees that if the land that Ruth and Yomi have are the exact same, basically, let's say each one has one field, or it doesn't matter how many fields, but all the fields are the best of the land, ED, both of Ruth's and both of Yomi's, or they're both Benonit and Benonit, or they're both Ziburit and Ziburit. Remember, there's different types of land. Ziburit is the worst quality, Benonit is the average, and Edit is the best. Normally, a Baal Chov, a creditor, can collect a loan back from Benonit. Okay, there's a few exceptions. First of all, if they don't have Benonit, then they take whatever they have. And if you remember, when you collect from orphans, you only collect from the Ziburit, from the worst. Okay, but generally you collect from Benonit. But if all they have is Edit, then of course, you're not going to bother. I'll give you my Edit land and you give me your Edit land. That's silly. It's the exact same thing. So everyone agrees in those cases, like Rav Sheshet. The machlok between Rav Sheshet and Rav Nachman is in the case, okay, now if one has Benonit, Ruth has Benonit, Yomi has Ziburit. So here's the machlok. Rav Nachman savar zeh. Why? Kasaval b'shelohem shamim. He holds that when we say Ziburit and Benonit and Edit, it's all relative. It's not that there's an absolute, what is Benonit, Ziburit, and Edit? No, it's that it's all relative to what you have. If you have Benonit and Ziburit, for example, average land and bad land, your average land becomes good quality land, and your bad land becomes average because compared to your Benonit, right? Because for you, the Benonit is actually the best. So therefore, the Ziburit becomes the average. If you do that, then what's going to happen? Okay, so let's see. Ate bal Ziburit, v'gavele leBenonit. Okay, so if you look at the chart here, Yomi has Ziburit land and Ruth has Benonit land. So Yomi is going to collect the Benonit from Ruth. Now, when she collects the Benonit from Ruth, what did we say? The Benonit is going to become Edit, and her Ziburit is going to be considered relatively Benonit. So when Ruth collects back from Yomi, she's not going to collect back from the Benonit that she just gave her. She's going to collect from the Ziburit land, which relatively speaking for Yomi is Benonit. So therefore, Rav Nachman says that's why each one collects, because Ruth's going to pay Benonit and Yomi's going to pay Ziburit land. So they're not going to end up, it's not a zero-sum game. Okay, so again, we're going to read it inside. Ate bal Ziburit, the one who owns the Ziburit, is going to be Gavele leBenonit. She's going to collect the Benonit of Ruth, which is the Have Gabe Edit. For her, it will become the best land. V'atahu v'shakal Ziburit. So then Ruth will come and take the bad land from her. And that's why you swap. Rav Sheshet is obviously going to hold. There's no point to switch hands. Why? It's not relative, it's absolute. So therefore, what will happen? Ruth will pay Yomi in her Benonit land. Yomi now has Benonit land. So when Yomi goes to pay Ruth, Yomi will pay back Benonit land. Okay? That's the machlok. That's according to the first explanation. The problem is that there's something that doesn't work. Well, the Rav Nachman, we're going to have a problem with. This was all only in the case where the Ziburit woman, Yomi, who has only Ziburit, pays first. Okay? So if the Ziburit woman collects first, because again, what will happen? Okay, if you look at this chart with all the arrows, it might look a little confusing, but I'll explain. Okay, I could have thought better of a better way, but this is what I came up with in a rush. So Ruth is going to pay first because Yomi is the Bala Ziburit. She collects first. She's going to collect from Ruth. Ruth has Benoni land. So she's going to connect Benoni. That Benoni for her becomes Edit. Then her Ziburit becomes Benoni. So Yomi is going to pay Ziburit. That's what happens. That's how we explain Rav Nachman. But that's only going to be true in a case where Yomi collected first. But if Ruth collects first, so again, Ruth has the Benoni. So what's going to happen? Yomi is going to give Ruth Ziburit property. When she gives her Ziburit property, according to Rav Nachman, what's going to happen to the Ziburit? since Ruth only had Benonit, her Benonit is going to become Idit. Her Ziburit is going to become Benonit, right? Her bad land is going to turn to average land because relatively speaking, it's average now. So then she's going to pay back with her average land, which is really not her average land. It's her Ziburit. It's her poor land. So she's going to give that Ziburit right back to Ruth. So if Ruth collects first, she's the Bala Ziburit. Sorry. If Ruth collects first, she's the Bala Benonit. She's going to collect Ziburit from the woman who only has Ziburit. And then she's going to give back that same Ziburit land because that Ziburit land becomes to her average land. So basically, then it's going to be a zero-sum game, and then Rav Nachman makes no sense. So basically, they don't like Rav Nachman because they say your case, right, is only if the Bala Ziburit Beresha. Late Baal Benoni Beresha. What if the Bala Benoni comes and collects? Ruth collects from Naomi, who's the Ziburit. First, V'ligbe Ziburit. This is just explaining what I just said. She'll collect the Ziburit. And then she'll collect right back that same Ziburit land. And then Rav Nachman makes no sense. To which the Gemara says, Lo tzricha dekadim tave. It's talking about a case where first Naomi came forward and said, I want to collect your land. She collected, and then Ruth collected. Okay, so Rav Nachman only makes sense in a case where first Naomi claimed, Ruth, you owe me money, and then only after Ruth came forward. To which the Gemara says that can't possibly be. Because the Mishna was talking about a case where both people took out a shtar chov, one against the other. And therefore, this doesn't really work. Okay, so they end up with a problem with Rav Nachman. To which they give a second explanation. Now they change it. Because they want to make a case. The whole problem happened here because since Ruth only had Benoni land, therefore, when she collected the Ziburit from Naomi, the Benoni turned into the best and the Ziburit turned into average. But if Ruth had Idit and Benoni to begin with, then the Benoni would remain average. So therefore, they basically say it's a case where Ruth had Idit and Benoni, not just one land. She had two types of land. And Itle Lechad Ziburit, and Naomi only had Ziburit. And then either which way you go, right, according to Rav Nachman, again, let's read the Machloket. Rav Nachman says, Bishalohen Shami. Right? Basically, it's all relative. So again, let's go through. If Naomi collects first, which was the original case we saw, so Naomi will give Zibur, right? Naomi collects first. So Ruth's going to give Benonit. The Benonit will turn into Idit for Naomi, and she's going to pay back in Ziburit. So Benonit goes, Ziburit comes back. In the second case, the same thing basically, but the opposite order. Naomi will pay the Ziburit first, and now Ruth has Idit, Benonit, and Ziburit, so she's going to pay Benonit. So either which way, it doesn't matter who collects first, Rav Nachman's going to say it makes sense to swap because they're each getting different things. And Mar Saval, Rav Sheshet's going to say, but she'll call it them him shamim. No, it's all zero-sum game because we assess Benonit stays Benonit always. Doesn't matter compared to your Ziburit. So basically, if Ruth pays Benoni, Naomi will pay her back in Benoni. Okay, and therefore, there's no point to change hands. So that's the second explanation of Machloket, which seems to be a better explanation. Now we're going to question Rav Nachman from our Mishna, to which the Gemara says it's not, but it says in our Mishna, Chachamim omrim zegove v'zegove, which sounds like Rav Nachman. Not like Rav Sheshet. Rav Nachman said she collects and she collects, or he collects and he collects. But Rav Sheshet said everything stays in the person's hands. There's no reason to change hands. So Tirgam Rav Nachman, I'll leave it to Rav Sheshet. This happens once in a while, where even though Rav Nachman was against Rav Sheshet in the Machloket, he actually brings an explanation of how to explain the Mishnah according to Rav Sheshet. To which he says, and we're not going to understand exactly yet how it's going to work. We're going to have three options here, as you see in the next chart. One loan was a 10-year loan, and 1 year was a 5-year loan. So as you can see from the chart, we're going to try both options. Which loan was which? The first loan was Ruth's loan, right? Ruth borrowed money from Naomi. That was the one with the earlier date. If that was for 10 years, and the second loan was for 5 years, you can't possibly say that Ruth can claim, there's no reason you should have taken out a loan from me if I owed you money. You should have just taken back the money because it was a 10-year loan. You can only collect a loan, and this is a point that they forgot to mention earlier, which is, or they didn't relate to it all. It's not they forgot to mention it, they just didn't relate to this issue, which is this whole idea of Admon saying you should have just collected the loan back. Well, maybe the date hadn't yet arrived. In other words, if Ruth took out a 10-year loan and Yomi comes after 5 years and wants her money back, she can't demand the loan back from Ruth. Ruth collected, took the loan out for 10 years. So then, right, so it doesn't make any sense. Admon's claim is just irrelevant there. Ella, so it would have to be the reverse. Rishon lechamesh v'sheni le'eser. But still it's not clear yet. So what if the first was 5 and the next one was for 10? We don't know what date you're talking about, the 10, right? The 10-year loan could have happened 2.5 years into the 5-year loan. So, hechidami, it's going to be the same problem. If the 5-year loan was already up, then my time of the Rabbanan. The rabbis make no sense. Admon's totally right. Why would Yomi take out a loan from Ruth? If Ruth already owed her money for the loan, she should have just collected her money. And if it's not yet, let's say it was 2.5 years into it, well, then we have the same problem we just said a minute ago. Then Admon makes no sense. Ruth can't say you should have collected the money from me. The date for the loan hadn't come up. So it happened, and by the way, here I forgot to fix. There's a mistake here too, and there's a mistake in this part of the chart. Should be the reverse Admon in the rabbis here. Sorry that I made that mistake, but anyway, we'll explain it, and I'll fix it up and put it up online correct after class. What happened? The loan is up, let's say today. Now, if the loan is up today, when is Ruth? The first loan is up today. Ruth's supposed to pay Yomi by the end of today, but it's the morning, and Yomi needs money in the morning. So if Yomi took out a loan from Ruth that morning, that's where they have a machloket. Mar savar avid inish yatzif liyomei. The rabbis hold, and this is where I had it wrong in the chart. The rabbis hold people could do that, take out a loan for a day. Yomi needs the money right now. So even though Ruth's supposed to pay her back this afternoon, she needs the money now. She'd take out a loan for a day. So therefore, it could make sense that there's 2 loans going on here, and therefore each one collects. But Mar Savar, lo avid inish yazif liyomei. But Admon says people don't do that. Yomi will just wait till the end of the day. There's nothing that can't wait. She's not going to take out a whole loan just for one day, and therefore Ruth can claim the first star must be mizuyah, right? It must be a forgery because there's no way you would have borrowed money from me this morning if I was going to pay you back the money later this afternoon. Okay, and therefore that's the machloket in the end. Okay, that's the first answer against Rav Sheshet. The second answer, we're going to bring another answer, but we're going to actually have a lot of difficulty with this answer. Rami Barchama Amal, Hacha biyat me'askin. Now again, what do we have to find here? We have to find a case where, according to Rav Sheshet, Ze v'ze gove is not going to be Ze v'ze gove, okay? Where even though the rabbis normally say each one collects, there's going to be no point for either one to collect. So what would be that, right? There's going to be an imbalance here. There has to be some sort of imbalance. So Rami Barchama says, the Mishna is talking about yitomim, about orphans. And it's a case where the Yatomim don't have any land. Now, when Yatomim don't have land, what did we learn? You can't collect from them. So therefore, if one of them is an orphan, then the one who's owed money from the orphan can't collect from the orphan. The orphan can collect from the other person, but the other person can't collect from the orphan. And that's how you get to what Rav Sheshet says, right? Rav Sheshet says, this is a zero-sum game, but the Mishna says Ze gove because one collects and the other one doesn't. Now you're going to say that's not what the Mishna says, which is exactly what the Gemara is going to say. What you're trying to say is the Mishna is talking about a case where only the Yatomim can collect, but the other person can't collect from the orphans. But that doesn't make any sense with the lines of the words of the Mishna. The Mishna says they collect and they collect. To which the Gemara answers, again, a weak answer, the Yatomim collect. The other person, right? Let's say Ruth is the Yatoma, so she can collect. Yomi is not a Yatoma. She can't collect from Ruth because Ruth is a Yatoma and has no land. And she should theoretically be able to collect, but she can't. That's what it means, Zegove v'zegove. So, I'm a Rava, shtei tshuvot b'davar. Something we see Rava say a number of times. I have 2 problems with what you just said. Chada d'zegove v'zegove katan. You can't possibly say that. It says, she collects and she collects. You can't say, No, that doesn't make any sense. Can't say she is supposed to collect, but can't. That's not the wording of the Mishna. And we already learned that Rav Nachman said, and I'll explain in a minute, we'll read Rav Nachman and then we'll say, we've seen this before, even though these Yitomim have no land, Ruth is the Yitoma, she has no land, but once she collects the land from Yomi, and now she has land, that's Yitomim Shegabu Karka B'Chovata Bihen. If the Yitomim don't have land when the father dies, but they then collect a loan that the father was owed, and they have land, anyone who's owed money can collect from that land. So what will happen? Ruth is an orphan. She collects from Naomi land. As soon as she has land, Naomi can collect the land from that land. So it doesn't make any sense what you suggested, that with Yitomim it should be different. So kasha, that in fact is difficult, to which the Gemara tries to explain a different way of explaining Rami Barham. We're back to the land. Again, we want to try to find where there's some sort of imbalance, where one's going to pay one kind of thing and the other's going to pay something else. So if the Yatom had only Ziburit land, okay, let's say it was Ruth, she was an orphan, she had only poor land. And the second Baal Chov Nomi had Idit Ubenoni, good land, right? Best land and middle class land. What will happen? The Yitomim will be able to demand Benoni land because they're a Baal Chov, but Magvule Ziburit. But what will happen? Nomi can only collect Ziburit from the Yitomah, from the orphan, because we learned before. It doesn't matter relative in that whole thing we discussed before. But even if you say it's absolute, we learned that you can only collect from orphans from Ziburit. So if you explain the Mishnah as Yatomim, that's how Rav Sheshet can read the Mishnah, and it's going to be imbalanced because one's going to give Beinonim and they're going to collect from the Yatomim only in Ziburit. However, it sounds like a great answer, but the Gemara questions it because the Gemara says the whole thing of collecting from Ziburit is only when you haven't taken the land, actually. But if you already are holding the land, let's say you took the land without asking, and you demanded the land for the Yitomim, not by law, you took it, and now they say, oh, it's not Ziburit, you don't have to give it back. Now, what's our case? Our case is, Nomi has land that's Beinomi. That land is going to go to the orphans, but that land theoretically is already owed back to Naomi because she's got a loan out with Ruth. So basically, it's as if she has the Benoni property in her hands at this moment. So therefore, it's like she's tafas. And therefore, in this case, actually, Naomi would get Benoni land back, okay? So that's why in the end, it is a zero-sum game, and therefore, this isn't a good explanation for Rav Sheshet. Okay, so the second explanation really gets knocked out. Okay, so Rami Braham in general is knocked out. New Mishnah. Here we start our last section for today. I'm going to stop share screen. There's a little bit more of the chart. You can use that as we go along, but not so necessary to use as we learn. Okay, classic. Okay, I know in our house, the joke is always, when you go to marry someone, my kids always laugh, but, you have to make sure your temperature is controlled. That, she likes air conditioning, he likes air conditioning, or she doesn't like air conditioning, right? We have a lot of issues in our family with people who like different temperature controls in the house. So now we're going to talk about something even more major than temperature control, which is where do you want to live? Okay. And not only that, I want you to imagine back in those days. Okay. So I'll give myself as an example. I left my house at age 20, moved to Israel on my own. Okay. Decided, even though my family lives there and I love my family and I spend a lot of time with my family and we communicate a lot, but I'm not living with them. Right. But imagine in those days where you don't have telephones and you don't have FaceTime or WhatsApp video and you don't have all these amazing ways of communicating, airplanes and all that. And your spouse decides we're moving far away. And my example wasn't good. I moved without my spouse, but here we're talking about spouses say, I want to move far away and I want to relocate, and basically removes this person from their entire, their family. In those days, everyone lived close to their family for the most part. It's a big deal. So therefore, the Mishna comes and states a very interesting thing to discuss at the end of this Masechet Ketubot about all the arrangements between husband and wife. Shalosh aratzot l'nisuin. They basically map out Israel. There's 3 sections for marriage purposes. What does this mean? Yehuda, Ever Yarden, Vagalion. 3 sections of the Jewish people. Ein motzi'im mi'ir le'ir mikrach lekrach. You can't move me from a city in Judea to a city in the Galilee. That's not fair. That's not part of the arrangement. When we got married, we were living here. We assume that this is where we're going to live, and you can't move me to a different city in a different region. Umi krach lekrach. Okay, city is not going to mean city here. Ir usually means city. In this case, krach is a bigger city. Ir is more like a village. If you're within Judea, there's no problem. You can move me from a city to a city, or again, a small town, a town to a town, we'll call it, ir le'ir, or from city to city. Avalomi ir lekrach. You also can't force me to move. If we lived in a small village, you can't make me move to a big city. Valomi krach le'ir. If we lived in a big city, you can't make me move to a village. Okay, and this seems to go in both directions. Okay, husband, wife. You can upgrade, right? You can go, right? You can't make me move to a worse place, but you can take me to a better place. Okay, whether the land is better, okay, the air is better, whatever it might be, it's not so clear. Rashbag you can't even make me move to a different place, like a better city, because it's bodek. We're going to see what that is in a few minutes. So bishlamami krach le'ir. This is an interesting assumption. We understand why you can't make someone move from a big city to a small town. Because it's much easier living in a city. You have everything accessible, supermarkets, right? Everything you might want, movie theaters, whatever it might be. But in the village, you can't get all that stuff. It's a pain in the neck, right? There's not a day of the shuk. You have to go to the big city. It's not nice, easy to live. My time, but why on earth would anyone, right? What's wrong? It's always better to move to a big city. So, this supports what Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina says. I'm Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina. Okay, people who like living in small towns. No, it's not always so easy to live in a big city. Not everybody wants to live in a big city. It's not the most pleasant life. Exactly, like Tova was saying, right? You guys are all saying all the things I was thinking of, which is right. Number one, right, some people like to live in small towns. They like the peace and quiet, or right, country mouse, city mouse. Exactly that story that I grew up on. So anyway, that's exactly what the sukh is all about. That story. So, how do we know that living in a big city is tough? Now, they don't bring human life examples, like usually the Gemara. What do? They bring a pasuk, okay? Shenemal, okay, in Sefer Nehemiah, what does it say? They blessed all the people who volunteered to live in Jerusalem. Jerusalem was a big city. It wasn't so easy to live in a big city. Therefore, the people had to get blessed because they had moved to Jerusalem. Okay, so it's not always easy to live in a big city. Rashbag Omer. Now, Rashbag says you can't even move me to a better place. Okay, why? Because it's bodek, my bodek. You move cities, you immediately start getting stomach problems, right? We all know this. You go on vacation somewhere and you drink the water and the water affects you and you start getting stomach problems. Or, you pick up whatever diseases are going around that place that your body wasn't used to. You move to a new country, it's often like the number one issue that goes on is you start getting sick the whole first year. So basically, he says, therefore, even if it's a better city, it's still not easy for people to move from one city to another. So you can't necessarily force them to do that, according to Rashbag. Ketubot Sefer Ben Sira. It's interesting why they quote Ben Sira. I'm not going to get into Ben Sira because we don't really have a lot of time today. But you can look up what Ben Sira is. We'll get to it other times in the Gemara. But Kol Yemei, it also says this pasuk in Mishle, which is strange why they quoted Ben Sira, which is an outside the Tanakh book, as opposed to Mishle, which was inside the Tanakh. Kol Yemei Oni Ra'im. All the days of a poor person are bad. Ha'ika Shabbatot v'Yamim Tovim, but aren't there good days, right? They have holidays and they eat better on holidays. Because when a poor person doesn't eat a lot of food during the week, and then they eat a lot of food on Shabbos, they usually get stomach problems because their body's not used to it. So here you get an example of changing anything in your pattern, your regular life can cause all sorts of issues. So obviously moving as well. Ben Sira Omer af leilot. Okay, this is an aside, which is much for quoting Ben Sira. He says there even nights, okay, not just the days of the poor person, but also the nights. Why? In general, he has our life because Bishval Gagim Gago, Ubimrom Harim Karmo, his roof is lower than all the other roofs, and his vineyard is high up in the mountains at the peaks. Mimtar ganim gagim legano, all the other rains that drip off the roofs go onto his roof and basically drip into his house. And all the dirt of the ground of his kerem basically goes downhill and he loses, right? His stuff doesn't grow well. Okay, so that was all about generally, can you force someone to move from place to place? And this basically says, no way, no how. However, and from here we're going to get into what's going to basically finish off our Masechet, is a whole long thing about the praises of Israel. So those living outside of Israel, don't be alarmed by some things you might read here. Don't take them too literally. I'll warn you already. So in terms of this relationship between husband and wife, everyone can insist. I can insist that you move to Israel, that my husband and my spouse move to Israel, but I can't force him to leave Israel if I want, okay? And likewise, he can force me to move to Israel, okay? This is very, aliyah oriented, right? And also very real. There's very many cases, having lived here for many years, I know that there's people who come here on aliyah, and one spouse really wants to move and the other doesn't. Right? Sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't work out, right? It's not always easy to force someone to move to a place where they don't want to move. So, Hakoma Alin Yerushalayim, just like Eretz Israel, we're now going to go up in Kedusha, right? Same thing if we're living outside Jerusalem and one insists, I live in Ranana, husband insists, we're moving back to Jerusalem. We used to live there. He always talks about we're going to move back one day. So he can insist that we move back to Jerusalem. But if only one of us wanted to leave Jerusalem and the other one didn't, so we wouldn't be able to force each other, the other one to go. Here we go with, okay, here's equality. In this area, women have total equality and say in terms of where we're living. Now, in terms of the Israel issue, okay? Israel is more important than anything, and therefore, each one can insist. What if, okay, now we're on a different issue. The ketuba has a certain amount of money, but money is different in different countries. The currency is different, okay? So if you marry in Israel, and you divorced her in Israel, obviously when you said zuzim, you meant the zuzim of Israel. But if you did it in kapotkia, the divorce was in kapotkia, you married her in Israel, divorce was in kapotkia, and the value of the coins in kapotkia are higher. I mean, she should get a higher ketuba if we go by kapotkia. Well, since you got married in Israel, or at least that's what it seems here, no te'ela mima'od Eretz Israel. She gets the value of what the ketuba was written originally in Israel. The marriage happened in Israel, in Kapotkia, and the divorce was by Eretz Israel. Now you're going to assume they're going to say Kapotkia because it goes by the marriage, but no. It says no te'ela mima'od Eretz Israel. Either which way she gets the ma'od of Israel, which we're going to see later, it's because it's the lower value, and we'll see why she always gets the lower value. Gemara is going to raise this as a problem with the Mishna and then explain. No, if she got married in Kapotkia, she gets like Kapotkia, okay, the higher value. Everybody agrees, though, that if the entire thing happened, we don't go, if I'm living outside of Israel, we don't go by the currency in Israel, we go by the currency in Kapotkia. Now the Gemara starts with the Mishna. Why does it say everyone? Everyone seems to include even more than husband and wife. To which they say, if I have, now think about this. You stole from me and couldn't afford to pay it back, so I make you my slave, okay? It's what we call an eved ivri. You're my slave for 6 years. If we make aliyah during those 6 years, you have to come with us. Very strange, right, to think about. Again, I didn't get back to this idea, but think about this whole thing of moving someone from their family, right? Here he's just a temporary resident in your house. You're allowed to basically move him. Some people actually have a version of the Mishnah where avadim is in the Mishnah itself. So then what's this hakol coming for? Hakol latuye mai. Latuye min aveh. You can even make an evet, it's to say, you can even force anybody. It's not who you can force. It's hakol ma'alim, even to move to Israel. And this often happens from a nice big house to a smaller house in Israel. Right? You can still force and insist, and they can't say, oh, well, I want my big house back. It's not fair to make me lower my standards. So why does it have to say again, not hakol motziim? What does that come to include in terms of making me leave Israel? Latuye eved, now we're talking about an eved Knani, Canaanite slave who, by the way, we're going to see here, is also commanded to live in the land of Israel because it's commanded in all positive mitzvah that are not time-bound, right? So, negative mitzvot and positive mitzvot that are not time-bound, and Yishuv Eretz Israel is not time-bound. So, Evet Shabarach michutz la'aretz, if we were living in Babylonia and he ran off to Israel, you have to go sell him there and move on. In other words, if you're not willing to move to Israel, you have to sell your slave and be done with him. Mishum yeshivat Eretz Israel. So that's what I call ena kol motzi'in. You can't force him to come back to you. Hakol ma'alin liYerushalayim latu yemai. Why does it again say hakol? Minavei yafem l'nevei ra'a. Okay, even if it's a worse place in Jerusalem, right? You're living in a teeny, crowded area in Jerusalem, which often happens. Okay, not always, but often there's spaces in Jerusalem. They're very crowded. I don't know about in those days, but even if it's worse, still, right? If the land is worse or something, you can still force. Okay, what does that come to say? Even from a bad place to a good, better place, you still can't force the other spouse to leave. It's really unnecessary. You didn't need to say that again because it's the inverse of the other statement. But they said it anyway, just to keep everything parallel in the Mishna. Now, what we didn't discuss is what if we disagree anyway? Okay, you can't force, so what does that mean? So basically what it means is grounds for divorce. And depending on the direction, it's going to affect how it comes out. Tanu Rabbanit, the brightest says, he wants to make aliyah, she doesn't. Kofin oto la'alot. Okay, we force him to make aliyah. V'im lav, what if he doesn't want to? Sorry, I skipped the line. Sorry, he says la'alot, she says no la'alot. Kofin ota la'alot. We force her to make aliyah. V'im lav, and if she doesn't want to, tetzei b'lo ketuba, goes back to what we've seen many times. She's breaching the marriage, basically, so she leaves without a ketuba. He omeret la'alot, v'omer shelo la'alot, if it's the reverse. Kofin oto la'alot, v'im lav, and if he doesn't agree, yotzi v'yitin ketuba. He has to divorce her. We force a divorce, which we learned many times what that means. We basically put sanctions until he divorces her, and he obviously has to pay her the ketuba because it's his fault. He omeret, let's say, okay, this is just repetitive. She wants to leave, v'omer shelo latzit. He doesn't want to leave Israel. Kofin ota shelo latzit, we force her not to leave. Otherwise, she leaves without a ketuba. He can divorce her. Let's say, we can force him not to leave. If he doesn't agree, he has to divorce her, leave the country, but divorce her first and give a ketuba. Someone called at 11 o'clock, like at night, on Saturday night this week, and said, I'm leaving the country and I have to give my wife a divorce now. How can I do it immediately? Like, I have to leave the country. I have to give her a divorce. It's very interesting, but it was exactly this. He's basically leaving the country, but he was at least making sure to give her the divorce document before he left. Okay, Nasaisha, Hagufa Kashya. So now we have this strange thing, which we mentioned when we read the Mishna about the order. Katani Nasaisha be'eretz Yisrael v'gersha b'kapot ke'anar telam ima'od eretz Yisrael. Amma batar shi'abud azlinan. Because the marriage was in Israel, and that's when he committed to the ketuba, so it goes by the money of Israel. But the second line doesn't agree with that. The marriage was a kapotkia, but the divorce, we go by the date that we collected, because then they're in Eretz Israel at the divorce, but not from the beginning. So now we get to a very basic machloket at the end of this big masechet, right? Is ketuba rabbinic or Torah law? Okay, big debate. There's a lot to be said about this. Unfortunately, we're over time today, but just in a nutshell, it talks about with the mefuteh that she gets kimor habatulot. Some people say that means ketuba is derived because it's talking about ketuba in the Torah. Some people say no, that doesn't mean it's by Torah law. It's just making mention of it. And in fact, it's interesting in the ketuba in America, they have, and I think in most places in Chutz La'aretz, it says in your ketuba, the money that's supposed to come to you by Torah law. In Israel, it actually says without the word doraita. There's a whole debate actually whether the doraita is referring to the ketuba or not the ketuba, or whether it's tying to the amount of money is committed to you from Torah law or not from Torah law. If we assess what the currency is by the Torah or not by the Torah, there's a whole debate about it. It's very interesting, but not for now right now. Okay. So again, if it's Rabbanan, then we basically are makel. Makel for who? Obviously, what's makel for one is machmir for the other. But it's makel for the husband. His commitment of giving a ketuba to the wife is only rabbinic. Therefore, we're going to be lenient and always go by the lower amount. But Rashbag says no, it goes by kapotkia. So why is that? Because ketuba doraita. Ketuba is by Torah law. Because by Torah law, we're going to be machmir and make him pay the higher amount. Tanu Rabbanan. Now we're moving away from ketuba. What if it's an IOU? So how do we know what to go by? Ketubot Bavel. If it says the document was written in Babylonia, then we go by Babylonia. Ketubot Eretz Israel. It says Israel. Eretz Israel. Ketubot Stam. It doesn't say. So it all depends on where you're claiming the money. You go to court now to get your money back. Hotzio Bavel. If it's in Babel, Bavel. Hotzio Eretz Israel. Then Eretz Israel. So it depends on where you are. That's what you call it. Ketubot Kesef Stam. What if it just says Kesef? Mashir Tzet Love Magbe. The Love gets to decide what, if it doesn't say which type of coins. So he decides he can take like the lower type coin. So Masha'en came b'ketuba. Okay, the Braita ends with it's not the same for ketuba, to which they say ahaya. What is this line referring to? And then they say aresha, to the first part of this Braita. Lafuke mi de Rashbag da amar ketuba de oraita. It's to say I disagree with Rashbag. Ketuba is only de Rabbanan, but right. I disagree with Rashbag, the ketuba is right, and therefore what's true for Balchov isn't exactly true for the ketuba. Ketubot kesef stam, mashir tzelove magbeyu. So now we're going back to that line of the Braita. Ve'emanaska. Maybe when they said silver, they didn't mean silver coins. Maybe they meant blocks of silver. Rabbi Elazar dechtiv be'matbea. It's in a case where it said coins, and then he can go by whatever coin he wants. Ve'ema prite. Can he go by like pennies? To which they say, Amarava Rav Papa prite de kaskalavi de'enashi. People don't make silver coins, right? We always know, like when you have pennies, they're always made from something different. They're not made from the same silver, same, right? It's always copper or something. Tanu Rabbanan. Now we get to the big lines that, on the one hand, right, should inspire you to move to Israel. On the other hand, don't feel terrible that you live in Chutz La'aretz. Don't take these so literally. Tanu Rabbanan. La'olam yadu adam be'eretz Israel afilu be'ir sheruba uvdei kochavim. You should always live in a city in Israel, even if it's mostly idol worshippers living there. Ba'al yador b'chutz La'aretz afilu be'ir sheruba Israel. Better live there than to live outside of Israel in a place where most of the people are Jews. Anyone in Israel, it's as if you have a God. And anyone who doesn't live in Israel is like they don't have a God. Okay, it's a very, very harsh language. And yes, very interesting that this is written in Babylonia. Although the truth is it wasn't really written in Babylonia, it's a Braita, so it was written in Israel. It was just quoted in the Bavli, more like why they quoted here. But it's because they really wanted to move back to Israel in an ideal sense. Oh, sorry, I skipped. 1 minute. If you live in Israel, outside of Israel, it's like you don't have a God. What are you talking about? So they say, okay, the reason is, sorry, I read it wrong. This is just the line and it's explaining it. It says the same thing a few times, so I got confused. This is just explaining it. How do we know it? From a verse in Vayikra. It says to give you Eretz Canaan in order to be your God, meaning God's going to be our God when we get to the land of Israel. Now they ask, what are you talking about? You don't have a God? It's like you're worshiping idols by not living in Israel. How are we going to? And by David, it says the following. This is our proof. David says to Shaul, you chased me away, okay, when Shaul was chasing David, you made me go to Chutz La'aretz, okay, to leave the Nachalat Hashem, to say, go worship Avodah Zarah. Now, nobody told him, go worship idols. He was basically saying, because I had to go to Chutz La'aretz, it was as if someone was telling me, go worship idols. So the proving this from verses, but what they're basically trying to say is, go make Aliyah, right? Go live in Israel, okay? The very famous sugya is coming up, which we're going to start with tomorrow, which is what we call Shlosh Tashvu'ot, the 3 swears about maybe we're not allowed to go up to Israel. Are we allowed? Are we not allowed? Do we have to wait till the future redemption? That and much more tomorrow. So we'll end here for today. Have a great day, everyone. Don't forget to register for the seat.